Two men went out for reconnaissance, and suddenly, a motionless zombie appeared ahead. Luke and Alden feel a little strange, but still go forward to deal with it. However, numerous zombies appeared around them, all staring fixedly at them. When they turned their heads again,
Trail ends here.
the missing two didn't come back all night. Tara went out with her team to look for them. Connie suddenly noticed something in the distance. A group of zombies was feasting on something. Yumiko advised everyone not to rush in and to maintain a distance, observing their hands for hidden knives. There might be whisperers among them. As Yumiko finished speaking, everyone sprang into action. They attacked the zombies from a distance, not allowing them to get close. In less than a minute, all 7 or 8 zombies had been killed. They noticed the zombies were feasting on Alden and Luke's horses. Connie also made a discovery: these horses' wounds appeared to have been deliberately made with a knife to attract the zombies. It was likely the work of the Whisperers. Alden and Luke were probably in grave danger. Yumiko initially wanted everyone to split up and continue searching, but Tara stopped them. Tara insisted they return to the hilltop immediately as it was no longer safe outside. Several people looked at Tara with confusion. Were they giving up on finding the missing men? Tara's expression turned serious as she explained that the girl had lied about there only being her mother among the Whisperers. There could be 3 of them or even 300, so they'll go back to the hilltop and make a plan before they go out. The chief has spoken and the rest of us can't say anything else. Back at the hilltop, Daryl returned to the cell again. This time, he wasn't hysterical or explosive. Ultimately, this girl was just a child. In a soft voice, he asked, "We're missing 2 people, but we found their horses, half skinned and half eaten by walkers. What would your mother do if she found them? Would she kill them?" Lydia pondered for a moment and replied, "If she had no choice, she'd probably have to." Subsequently, Lydia began to recount her experiences since the apocalypse began. From her narrative, they learned that Lydia's father had been eaten by zombies while trying to save her. Her mother had grown increasingly cold and her treatment of Lydia had become horrendous. Lydia had spent almost the entirety of the past 10 years in an abusive household. Hearing this, Daryl wasn't sure if Lydia was telling the truth, but he could empathize deeply. After all, Daryl had also grown up in an abusive environment. Then Daryl took out a bottle of medicine from his body and threw it in. Daryl had just noticed that Lydia had been touching her ear. It should be inflamed. Lydia didn't refuse and reached the medicine with her foot. Having learned about Lydia's experiences, Daryl's tone softened. He assured her, "You help us, and we'll accept you too." Lydia didn't respond directly. She only asked if Daryl could give her some water to drink. Daryl naturally agreed, turning to fetch water with a spoon. Just as Daryl extended the spoon to her, Lydia suddenly lunged, trying to grab the spoon as a weapon, but Daryl was prepared, catching her arm in a firm grip. He then gently rolled up Lydia's sleeve, revealing a series of scars covering her arm. Daryl released his grip on Lydia. It seemed that Lydia's accounts of her experiences were indeed true, and she had endured long-term abuse. With a heavy sigh, Daryl walked out of the cell. Later that night, Daryl returned with a branch in hand. As he walked, he began speaking. Sometimes parents find 1,000 reasons to hit their kids. Maybe they're drunk, or they're in a bad mood. They're all just assholes. Daryl's words were laden with emotion, as if he were reflecting on his own childhood. Daryl had thought that Lydia would empathize and help them locate their missing friends. However, Lydia's response surprised him. Her mother had brainwashed her extensively, convincing her that this world now belonged to the zombies. Lydia believed her mother's purpose for hitting her was to toughen her up, to make her resilient and able to walk with the dead. She dismissed places like the hilltop as mere fantasies. Daryl was furious. The girl was so twisted, it was a waste of time to talk to her, and he walked out in a huff. Outside the cell, Henry was sitting and called out to Daryl. Henry is also outside eavesdropping like Daryl. He wants to ask Daryl what to do with this girl. Daryl said with anger that it was better to leave it to Tara. The girl was too twisted. Henry asked directly, "Did someone used to hit you, too?" Daryl turned to look at him. Henry continued, "Once I heard my dad ask my mom why she used to wear her hair so short. His mother revealed that her first husband used to hit her. If she tried to escape, he would grab her hair and slam her against the wall. That was why she cut her hair short. Just like you, you're always behaving as if you're a violent maniac." He believed that Daryl was just protecting himself. not actually a violent person. Henry thinks Lydia is like Daryl in that Lydia's associates are bad, but she's not necessarily bad. She was just lonely and scared. He proposed that they could help her understand that the Hilltop was safe and that there was nothing to fear. Those words touched Daryl, too. Some shadows can last a lifetime. Daryl couldn't help but pity Lydia once again. Henry has a point, so let him try to calm Lydia down. As they conversed, four figures sneaked along the perimeter of the compound. It was Yumiko and her group. They didn't have any malicious intentions. They just wanted to go outside to search for Luke, so they're going to sneak out through the tunnels. After a while, the group arrived at the forest where the horses were found during the day. They hoped to follow the tracks to find clues about their missing friends. However, the footprints on the ground were too chaotic and difficult to decipher. They gathered to discuss their next move, but suddenly a zombie lunged at them. Though it didn't harm them, the forest's darkness echoed with the sounds of zombie groans. Shadowy figures moved toward them. Realizing the forest wasn't safe, they understood the risks of nighttime action, and it might be futile as well. Yumiko suggested returning to the hilltop and searching during the day. They retraced their steps back, unaware that a few zombies were still lurking in the woods, eavesdropping on them. Meanwhile, Henry secretly made his way to the cell. It's the first time the two kids have seen each other's faces, but they both recognized each other's voices. Henry had always believed that Lydia was a good person. He covertly obtained a key and unlocked the cell door. Henry wanted to show Lydia around and demonstrate that good people lived here. Holding Lydia's hand, they strolled through the yard. Suddenly, a distant figure appeared. It seemed to be one of the patrolling members. They panicked, stepped on a brick and fell to the ground. Luckily, the people over there didn't notice them. At this moment, Lydia spotted something in the grass, looking like a treasure to her. Lydia dug out a worm from the soil and held it in her palm, removing the excess dirt. Curious, Henry followed her gaze. She then placed the worm in her mouth and began chewing. Henry was dumbstruck. Lydia then handed another worm to Henry. Henry hesitated, not reaching out to take it. Lydia thought Henry was thinking there was too much dirt and proceeded to clean up the bugs for him. Seeing Henry's hesitance, Lydia was puzzled. She wondered why he wasn't taking the delicacy she offered. Reluctantly, Henry took it from her and put the worm in his mouth. Attempting to chew it, he struggled to suppress the urge to vomit during the process.
I just ate a worm.
After finishing the worm, Henry continued walking with Lydia, explaining the layout of the hilltop and introducing the people living there. Lydia also cooperated with the conversation. Lydia's hand stealthily reached for the hammer on the table, preparing to use it to attack Henry and escape. Lydia looks around nervously and asks questions to distract herself, and Lydia's hand is completely gripping the hammer, despite what Henry says about how great this place is. According to her mom, it shouldn't exist. Just as Lydia was preparing to make her move, the sound of a crying child reached their ears. In the distance, a mother was soothing her baby to sleep. In that moment, Lydia thought about the pre-apocalyptic world, how her mother had cared for her so attentively, fearing for her safety. But slowly, her mother had changed. She shaved her head, and everything began to shift. She not only forced Lydia to wear a mask but also subjected her to frequent beatings. Henry sensed that something was off with Lydia and quickly called out to her. Lydia snapped back to reality but didn't say anything. She simply asked Henry to take her back to the cell. Unbeknownst to them, Daryl had been observing from the shadows all along. Even if Lydia had tried to harm Henry, he wouldn't have been hurt. Once they arrived in the cell, Lydia's mood remained subdued. Henry thought it was his fault and apologized before preparing to leave. At that moment, Lydia stopped Henry. Perhaps not everyone would understand Lydia's emotional shifts, but a child who had endured domestic abuse carried an internal scar. Right now, Lydia desperately needed someone to be with her, to prevent her from reliving the lonely, fearful nights. Henry had been the first person to treat Lydia kindly in a long time. He had shown her unconditional trust, which had touched her deeply. The boy had found his way into Lydia's heart. The next morning, Daryl arrived with breakfast early. A hint of shyness appeared on Henry's face, and he explained that he had been there to keep Lydia company. Daryl didn't expose them. Lydia got over it, and last night was the best night's sleep she'd ever had. She didn't have to worry about getting beaten up. She also understood that the people here were genuinely good. The twisted person was her mother. So, Lydia decided to tell Daryl everything she knew. Daryl remained silent throughout, offering her a spoon filled with water. This time, Daryl was not guarded. Perhaps only someone who had shared a similar fate could truly empathize. Lydia began to speak. Our group is called the Whisperers. My mother is the leader, and everyone refers to her as Alpha. She won't come looking for me. The entire group won't. If someone is captured or dies, they just move forward, as if those individuals never existed. Unless absolutely necessary, they usually don't antagonize larger survivor groups. Lydia continued. I was brought here initially to gather information, to feed them details when I escape. Otherwise, they have no reason to accept me again. Curiously, Henry asked, are you really her daughter? How could she just abandon you like this? Lydia didn't respond, her eyes betraying a sense of desolation. Daryl then asked, what happens to our people if they're captured by them? Lydia answered with sadness, if my mother finds them, I can't imagine any reason they'd survive. I'm sorry, if you want to find them, there's a makeshift camp near the bridge, but we don't stay in one place for too long. We move with the zombies. After conveying this, Lydia began describing her mother's personality and character. For a good 10 minutes, Lydia recounted her mother's cruelty and ruthlessness. As they listened, both Daryl and Henry were left with a heavy feeling. Daryl also spoke to comfort Lydia and then he left. He was preparing to visit the Whisperers' camp. As he left the cell, Henry followed and asked a question. In his heart, Daryl had already decided to keep Lydia here. Outside, the four-person team had just returned beyond the fence. Yumiko looked up and saw Tara. They exchanged a glance, and Yumiko felt somewhat guilty, preparing to apologize to Tara. After all, they had left without a word. Upon reaching the enclosure, before Yumiko could speak, Tara was the first to ask if they had found anything. Yumiko could only offer an awkward smile and then apologized for their actions. In truth, the guards had already noticed their departure the previous night. Tara understood their concern for their teammates' well-being, but as the leader, she hoped that Yumiko would at least inform her when going against her decisions in the future. Tara simply didn't want to see more deaths. Yumiko was about to respond when a disturbance caught their attention from a distance. Yumiko picked up binoculars to get a closer look. A group of walkers was approaching from afar, but upon closer inspection, they realized these were actually the Whisperers. Connie, who was walking behind, senses something is wrong and sees it through the cornfield. The guards outside hurriedly pulled Kelly back inside the gate, but Kelly was concerned for her sister who was still outside. Meanwhile, Connie took cover in the cornfield. Tara is also in a bit of a panic. After all, she was new to being a leader. Tara hurriedly called out to Daryl in the yard. 2 minutes later, the Whisperers had reached the fence. The leader of the group was a bald woman. The men on the walls watched patiently, wondering what they were going to do.
I'm Alpha, and we only want one thing from you. My daughter.